You guys are awesome. I think I kind of need to make a panorama of this while everyone's still filtering in. Is that all right with you guys? You can, all right. Yes, do it. I have to say that's definitely been different from another event that I usually go to. Anyone heard of MagFest? So you guys that go to MagFest, what do we have at MagFest? We have a Colossus roar, and I think "Do It" is the Colossus roar of BronyCon. I really do. It is right now, yeah. All right, so I'm going to do this panorama thing. Let's try and move the water. Yeah, probably move my laptop. Well, my laptop can stay up. All right, yeah, I suppose I could stand up. I don't know, I'm lazy. There we go. All right, let's try and do this. Let's try and do it. Capturing panorama while I'm tethering internet off of my phone while I'm playing Chiptunes. I'm also just going to snap a couple because I think this is probably not working as well as I think it should. Who in here doesn't know what a chiptune is? We have a couple hands. You're listening to one. So I'm going to go over this in great detail, but I happen to be a 35-year-old man that's still addicted to Nintendo. Thank you. I'm also really addicted to old school Atari, Commodore, Sega, some other stuff. Lots of stuff, really. All right. TurboGrafx, I do know about the TurboGrafx. There we go. All right. I just think this is an awesome turnout. Love you guys. All right. Let's get this show on the road, shall we? So I just kind of gave you a little bit of information about a chiptune, but basically the most important differentiation that I can make right now, and I mean, chiptunes is kind of blown up into this like thing that you don't even really know what it is, and everyone's just like, oh yeah, it's retro blippy bloppy stuff. And honestly, that's kind of what it means now, but I come from kind of an old school perspective where these days, sound cards in computers that you don't even really have sound cards anymore, you just have a chip on the motherboard with a speaker jack. But like PlayStation, Xbox, all of these systems are stream-based, and you can just kind of take audio and send it to a chip, and the chip already knows how to turn that recorded sound into stuff that should come out of the speaker. But it didn't always used to be that way. Back in the Atari or Nintendo or like original Sega days, you had to send values to a chip and be like, I want to hear this tone, and I want to hear it out of this channel, and I want to hear it played with this instrument, and that sort of a thing. So the chip itself is the thing making the tune, and that's why it's called a chiptune. There's also, does anyone know or remember the Commodore Amiga? All right, actually you got some hands, that's awesome. So there's another definition that a lot of old people use. Sorry, shout outs to my old bros or whatever. If you remember like playing old DOS games, you had to like figure out how to get enough memory to play the game that you wanted to play, and if you didn't have that, you were always fighting for something called conventional memory. On the Amiga, that's called chip memory, and the idea is that the memory at the beginning of you'll have 2 or 3 or something like that megabytes of RAM, and the very beginning of that is the RAM that only the chips on the motherboard can access. So if you want to play a sound or a song or something like that and have the sound chip directly playing music that was recorded without help from the CPU or help from anything else, it has to be in chip memory. So if the song fits in chip memory with the program that's running, it's also called a chiptune. But that's only if you know what an Amiga is, and that's like, I don't know, so niche that I probably even shouldn't be talking about it right now. So let's talk about other stuff. I'm gonna kill this song. If you like it, we'll play more later. If you didn't notice, that was Pharrell, It Girl, but on a Nintendo. All right, so let's talk about chiptunes a little bit more. And wonder why it's, let's not do that. Let's just do it this way. There we go, whatever. All right, so these days, people probably only know about chiptunes and 8-bit stuff because of Minecraft or Terraria. Ironically, neither of these games are really 8-bit, but this is kind of more perpetuating the whole idea that I was giving, where chiptunes and 8-bit music is kind of just viewed as, you know, like bleepy bloopy stuff, and a lot of people associate pixelated stuff with 8-bit graphics. So ironically, in Minecraft, you're not actually using pixels, you're using something called voxels, because it's 3D pixels, basically. But you might also be familiar with some cartoons. Does anyone here watch cartoons? I mean, like, we're at BronyCon. I don't think anyone does, right? We have been denied by the gods of YouTube. Let's try another one. Does anyone watch this? Oh! These worked just this morning, and that's how awful this is. All right. I know that this channel has not been removed because it's on my own channel. So let's do the back in time thing.
The channel associated with this video has been terminated.
So everyone's played this, I hope, or at least knows what it is. No sound. I should be having sound. Okay, hold on. Let's jack it up a little bit. That's a little better. So, since I'm a music guy, I'd really like you to pay attention to the music, even though the visuals are very stunning and, you know, lure you in. So what are we looking at? I heard someone actually specifically say Mario Wii U, and you are correct. Let's go a little further back in time. What is the thing with pipes anyway? I get it, but I mean, like, how do you fit in a pipe? I mean, that's like, it's a huge pipe. I think the people that wrote the game lived in a world of talking mushrooms. All right, so something sounds kind of the same. I'm not quite sure what it is. All right, so a little further back in time. A little bit more of a groove going on in this one. It's kind of annoying noise, you know, but... Oh, hey. So, wait a second. I ran this panel before. Is this the original? No. Thank you. We're going to keep watching. Someone else yelled at me and they were like, it's the original! And I was like, you're going to have to wait about 30 seconds. Decided not to walk on top of the top bricks. YouTube Let's Players, right? Oh wait, this is my channel. Alright. Does everyone that's old feel sufficiently old? Hey, I got some gray hair too, so don't worry about it, all right? All right, so this is my era. For all you children in the audience, I'm sorry, I'm an old person, and this is my game right here, right? It's not any of the other stuff. That's when I started playing games, actually before that. So I have always been fascinated by how to get sound out of old game systems. Like, you know, you've got this like little piece of junk hardware. I mean, the Nintendo really is, by today's standards, complete junk. Who has a computer and knows how fast it is? I don't, too many hands. Blue hat. How fast is your computer?
I don't know the exact number, but it definitely blows the original NES out of the water.
All right, so who knows how fast in clock speed their computer is?
AMD 8350, hot at 4 gigahertz.
4 gigahertz. So who knows how fast a gigahertz is? 1,000 megahertz. So the CPU inside of the NES is 1.79 megahertz. Your computer is officially at least 2,000 times as fast as one NES, more than that really. So the NES is crazy slow, and so it's got all of these chips and extra hardware to help it do its job. And figuring out where to get that sound over to the NES is kind of a chore. And so it's kind of impressive that games from 85, 83, whatever, are actually capable of doing anything reasonable at all. But then there are old people like me that are wondering why we're still waiting for web pages to load on 4 gigahertz machines. So, all right, let's take... Does anyone, well, I did this panel before, I was like, oh, does anyone know what this is? But it is kind of written right on it. All right, so, and then I just kind of spoiled it by accident, yeah. So this Atari is actually older than me. Thank you, I needed that back pad. I really did. And back in that era, this is what a laptop looked like. They didn't know what the term laptop was. Instead, these computers were called luggables. There is also, more popular than the compact portable is perhaps a K-Pro. Does anyone know what a K-Pro is? I see at least 2 hands. That is amazing. Okay, I'm going to stop making all of us feel old, but like tell you maybe just a little bit more of how I got into this. So I learned to build computers in that era when I was a kid, and I went to a computer show. Shout outs to anyone that's been to Meadowlands, New Jersey, which is like right down the street from your house, right? Yeah. So anyway, I went to this computer show, and I'm this 11-year-old kid, and I asked the guy if I could build a computer, and right across from his booth is this guy showing off a PC from 1991, which has just made like beeps and boops until now. And somehow his computer is playing like Everybody Dance Now from CNC Music Factory. Couldn't quite figure it out. So I'm just like glued to this computer across an aisleway at effectively a computer convention, like trying to figure out how it's doing that while I'm building this computer for this other guy that thinks I'm gonna blow everything up because I'm an 11-year-old kid trying to build a computer. And so I finished building my computer. The guy tells me to come back for a job, but I lived in Idaho at the time, and that didn't really work out. But I go over to this other guy. He's like, so I'm selling all this music on disc if you'd like to buy some. And I went home. I got a sound card for Christmas that year. Went home and I ordered 20 discs of the stuff. And mingled in with the discs is a program called a tracker, which I kind of had open over here. So this is a new version of a tracker, but by new I mean maybe 10, 15 years old. And the one I was using back then was even older, but they all look the same, they all operate the same way, and I learned that you can write Nintendo music in this stuff. So that is my fascinating sort of intro to how I became a chiptuner guy. There's a computer that kind of looks like the one I built, by the way, just in case you're interested. So this is what I was looking at across the way, and you'll notice that there are 4 channels. So you've got You've got, I can use my mouse cursor, right? It shows up, good. So you've got 4 individual channels, so you can only make 4 sounds at a time. In this case, this track is based on samples. So this is the program that can reproduce music that has already been recorded. But I'll give you a view of this because it gives you an idea of polyphony. This is from a game called Turrican, if you've ever heard of it. So you can see like the drums are going on in the first one, and he's doing like some sort of string thing here, and doing some sort of bass thing here. And this is kind of my primer to, oh hey, this is how people kind of wrote game music back in the 80s and 90s. Sounds pretty good. Not bad for a game out of the early 90s. I decided to take it a little bit older. Is there anyone in here that doesn't know what this is?
Don't be embarrassed.
You don't have to be embarrassed. We're not going to make fun of you. I actually have candy up here if you want some, to make you feel better. Yeah, I didn't segue that very well. Anyway, this is the first Nintendo from 1985. It came out in Japan in 1983, and I already mentioned it's only 1.79 megahertz, right? And so here's some of my favorite NES games. One of them is this guy right here. You run around a lot, and this guy says barf when you punch him in the stomach. Yeah. Oh, and Mama, that's enough. I do not endorse violence, however, it is funny when it's on a cartoon. And here's something else that I don't know if anyone's no one watches cartoons, right? So everyone that's playing Ninja Turtles on, any relatively new system and actually has good-looking Ninja Turtles, this is what I had to deal with. So these guys are somehow getting reasonable sound out of this crappy Nintendo that can only make 3 tones at a time. You can get 2 square waves, which is the sort of hollow sound. You can get 1 triangle wave, and you can't control the volume on the triangle wave because it's a hack. That it's a triangle, that is. And then you can get fuzz, which, who here knows what TV fuzz sounds like? Okay, let's do this in reverse. Who has never heard TV fuzz in their life? We still have a few people because now the TV just blues it out, right? It's it's on a channel that doesn't exist. We don't even have TVs that know how to tune in to channels that don't exist. So, stupid TVs, correct. So you have these 3 sound waves, and then you have fuzz, and then you have kind of crappy drums. Does anyone remember the steel drums in Mario 3? Or the bongos in Mario 2? Or the really cool drum kit in Contra? So you can do these kind of not very good sounding drums or samples out of the Nintendo, but it's nothing like what you should hear now. So, what is a chip? It's a potato? Yeah, it's a potato in its former life, and then it grows up to be fried in oil, and then eventually it ends up in my mouth. So this is the inside of a Nintendo, and actually one of the interesting things about the Nintendo is that this chip over here, which is the CPU in the Nintendo, the thing that's not even 2 megahertz, the sound is kind of just crammed up its butt. There's no real good way to put it because the sound chip is actually a part of the CPU, and unless you turn on a Nintendo and boot it up and you're running software on a Nintendo, you can't actually make sound on a Nintendo. And that's something that I kind of didn't know until I started writing Nintendo music. But a lot of systems will have another chip, like this one, except this isn't actually a sound chip, just nearby that the CPU can, over a couple of these pins, send information over to this thing, and they will actually, communicate with one another and send the values, like the I want to play this note, or the I want it to be this loud, or that sort of a value, and then the other chip over here will synthesize the music and output it. And I have a visual aid, which may or may not work. Let's see.
Hopefully YouTube has not destroyed it.
Sorry?
Hopefully YouTube has not destroyed it.
Oh, well, fortunately, we don't have to worry about that. But we have... Actually, you know what? I don't know that I have it loaded, but I suppose I could, we can just do this. Twitter, inverse phase, Pokey register. So my housemate and I are building a thing. And you put one of those chips in the middle of it. We call it the Retro Soundinator because we couldn't really come up with a good name. And you can see that we've gone ahead and taken a chip kind of similar to an Arduino and wired up a whole bunch of wires to the places that you need to talk to that chip. And we also have an emulator wired up kind of in a similar way so that we can prototype before we do that sort of a thing. So today I'm not going to be showing you this board, but I will be showing you sound that comes out of something similar. And so basically the way this works is over here is a USB port. We plug that into a computer, and then we use a tracker program like I just showed you. And the tracker program will send signals to this chip. And then over here, you can sort of see two RCA jacks that you could plug into a stereo or a speaker or something. All right, let's keep moving. Here's a game and stuff. You like my slide titles? If anyone's into Smash Brothers, I met this guy. He went to school at Drexel, and now he's working on some crazy indie games. But we went ahead and did a Game Boy version of Smash Brothers. And this is real, and this is free, and you can go and download this on the internet and play it on your PC right now. You can't play it on a real Game Boy because we're lazy. That's really the long story short, and it's a free game, so we're not really making money off of it, so we didn't go the extra mile. But the reason I put this out there is because maybe you'd like to play a game with music written by me. This is a slide that doesn't have any bearing on this panel, but actually it sort of does. BronyCon is full of My Little Pony IP. Have you ever noticed how, like, the intellectual property holders of My Little Pony are kind of cool with that? Not everyone is. So if you ever do cover songs or whatever, it's sometimes a good idea to, go out and talk to the people that did the song that you're doing a cover of and just be like, hey, you mind if I do that? And if they're not okay with it, then, well, then I heard someone shouting, don't do it, in the vendor room earlier. But you can actually license the song and just hand them money, and they're legally obligated to let you do a cover version of their song. That doesn't mean that you won't anger them or upset them, and that doesn't mean that they won't sue you, but that does mean that you might actually have legal ground to stand on. So be careful if you ever do that. So let's talk more about the NES. I mentioned earlier that we have some square waves and various other stuff. So the square waves that you can make out of Nintendo are these. Let's see if I can I get a little more volume on that? So we have this, this square wave, which looks like that right there. We have the second square wave, which is just a little bit thicker sounding. A lot of people like using this for a lead instrument. We also have what is called these all have percentage names. And the reason they have a percentage name, this is a 50% square because half of the time the sound is off and half of the time the sound is on. And so this one sounds very kind of hollow, sort of flute-like. We also have, this also sounds kind of flute-like. This is the triangle wave that Nintendo makes. This is the one that we don't have volume control on, and everyone uses it as bass because the Nintendo can actually make this instrument go a little bit lower. So, a case in point, we can go down to about, oops, I keep on hitting the wrong, there we go. So we can drop this down to about here, whereas the square waves, like this guy, barely goes down to about here. This is about the range of that instrument. So the reason that your 80s TV was always blowing up with Nintendo bass is because you either have to make the bass or you have to turn it off. So I thought I'd give us a little bit of a starter, just so that you can see how these things come together. And I thought, I know it's not My Little Pony, but you mind if we start with Zelda? Any Zelda fans in the audience? All right. So we're just going to write one from scratch. Amiga? The proper way you say Amiga is Amiga. All right. So yes, there is actually a reference to Amiga in here. Because the sampled instruments that you heard from the program that was playing Turrican music, the way it loops its instruments, they figured out, oh yeah, well, you've got this string instrument, right? But if you just from halfway through the instrument to the end of the instrument, just constantly loop it, you can have a string that takes up a lot less room. So that is an Amiga loop. But later on, they came up with ping pong loops, and we don't really do any of the looping on here. I have looping on because I want to hear this sound wave more than once. But if you play it backwards, you actually get different sounds. And it also drops an octave, because what it's doing in this case is playing the sound wave and then bouncing backwards, and then playing the sound wave again and bouncing backwards. So we're going to stick to this guy. So let's do Zelda Dungeon. Does it sound good? So that kind of... Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I don't have any musical talent, so you can do this, I promise. I can't play any instruments, and I don't have any music theory. So I'm a game composer, and I do this just all from scratch, by ear, by hand. In this package here, you can see that the columns here are your channels, and that's where your sounds go. And then the rows, you saw earlier when I was playing the song, it was kind of trickling through these rows, and what's going on there is it's just kind of triggering it like one of those music boxes that you wind up and the pegs kind of trigger the notes. So you're effectively typing music into a spreadsheet that has a play button on it, and it will progress through kind of in a very, I don't know, just a regular fashion. And I can explain this actually for the old people in here. I'm sorry, kids. You might like this too, but what is the frequency of the power that comes out of your wall?
60 hertz.
There we go. 60 hertz. And also back in the CRT tube television days, a TV would refresh at a sync rate that was 60 hertz as well. So it would be using the frequency of the power that's coming out of the wall as a way to time itself. And there's a gun at the back of the TV shooting electrons at the front of the screen and drawing a picture on the screen 60 times a second. So inside of game systems, we have this little speed thing over here. It's labeled tempo in here, called 6, or currently it's 6. We can change it, you know, and that sort of a thing. So 6 means wait 6 refreshes of the TV before going to the next line in this spreadsheet thing. So that's what the tempo is based on. And we also kind of have a tweaking beats per minute thing. And there's a magic beats per minute for the Nintendo, because do TVs run at the same frame rate in Europe? I heard a lot of no's, but a lot of unsure no's. Well, I'm going to make your unsure no a very sure no. They run at 50 hertz, 50 frames a second. So if you do a bunch of awkward, annoying math, you'll figure out that 150 beats per minute is kind of a magic tempo that music will play at the same speed in Europe and in Japan and in the US and in Australia. So, and all the other places. We don't want to leave them out. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 150, and we're going to start writing music. So you see this little editing checkbox here? I can toggle this on and off with my space bar. So for people that aren't very good at music, or they're just trying to figure out where the notes are or whatever, like me, you can just turn off editing, figure out where your notes are, and then turn editing on, and your notes will just go into the slots. So I'm going to go ahead, and it works kind of like a word processor too. Like you can just hit delete on stuff that you don't like, or you can hit backspace to pull stuff back up, that sort of a thing. And we're going to figure out Zelda on the spot. Right? So we lay this in here. I'm going to introduce you to my best friend, copy paste. So we start on this, we've got, oh dear, it's too slow. So if I change this tempo to 3, is my song going to be faster or slower? Correct. All right, so we're getting somewhere. Someone tell me what's wrong with this. Incorrect. It loops too many times. Yes, we haven't written the rest of the song. But what's wrong with what we're hearing right now compared to the actual song?
No bass line.
No bass line, good. And the bass line isn't really a bass line as much as sort of a accompaniment bass thing. But let's go ahead and put that in there so that you can go on and tell me more things that are wrong, which I actually want you to do. So here's that triangle wave, right? We want to go. Yeah, that sounds a little better, right? And notice I'm just turning editing off when I need to find a note because I never learned to play the piano. So I'm just kind of dumb in that regard. So now we've got this. Pretty close. Something else is wrong, though. Does anyone know what it is? Wait, let's start over. We need drums. There are no drums in this song, but I will put some in for you. It doesn't just loop like that the entire time. The song is incomplete. Yes, we haven't written the rest of the song, but this part of the song. Does anyone else? It's still too slow. It's still too slow. The tempo is right. There's no echo. Anyone remember the echo? I was sorry to leave you stringing along there, but you have a couple of the notes that kind of hang. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We've got this extra channel here. It's not doing anything. So we're going to go ahead and make it do something. So, and we're going to take out those right there. So now we're left with these guys right here. We're using all of our channels at this point, other than the white noise and the crappy drums. Does it sound so much better? Much more full. And so, obviously the song isn't, we haven't progressed with writing more song yet, but you can see how that is pretty easy to get down in a matter of, 5 minutes? So, and that's with me asking you what's wrong with the song. So, I'm going to do, we got a request for drums, and there are no drums in this song, but it's time that we just do something. Bless you. So we've got some Mario 3 drums here. And yeah, Mario 3 wasn't really... So we could just lay down these drums. That's the boring part, just typing in notes. But then we end up with... So, and I'm actually off. And we can just fix that by messing with insert and delete keys. Here, let's try it. That's a little better. What's up? This is called Sound Tracker, although this is kind of hacked to pieces, and I would recommend if you're trying to learn to do this yourself, you get something called DefleMask or FamiTracker. What operating system do you run? Windows, Linux, Mac? Okay, if you use Windows, then FamiTracker is kind of the answer. But if you use anything else, you probably want to get DefleMask. And DefleMask works on Windows too, and the reason I'm shouting that out is because it's not just good for NES music, it's also good for writing Genesis tunes, or who said TurboGrafx earlier? You can write TurboGrafx music in DefleMask. So, DEFLEMASK. And FamiTracker is FAMI tracker, like the word tracker. What? You want to hear some Genesis? Should we keep going on Zelda, or you guys want to hear some Genesis music? All right. I heard every answer possible and then some. Just do it. All right. We're doing it live here. I am going to go ahead and open up. I'll open up DefleMask. I just recently wrote a brand new track that I'd love to play for you, so I'm going to. And that new track, where is my... It's on the other display, but I can't... All right. Move. No. Yeah, I guess I could just kill Firefox. Oh, there's my, yeah. Once upon a time. Anyone know who this guy is? He's kind of cool. I would really like to move you, window. There we go. That is the window I want. Actually, no, 10C is what I want. All right, so here is what DefleMask looks like. Notice it kind of looks the same as the other tracker right here. And if I load something in, you'll just notice the one thing that you notice the most is that you've got a ton more columns or channels that you can work with in here. That's because the Sega Genesis sound chip has 6 channels, and then, does anyone know what a Sega Master System is? Inside of the Sega Genesis is a Sega Master System, so you can control both at the same time if you're careful. And DefleMask lets you do that. And also, if you look here in the options, actually in the disk operations, you can see this save VGM and save ROM. You can actually, in both FamiTracker and DefleMask, you can hit the save button and save a ROM that you can copy onto a cartridge and actually put it in a Nintendo or a Genesis or whatever system you're writing music for. The other program doesn't do that, and that's why I'm recommending that you don't remember Sound Tracker at all, because I've just hacked a bunch of emulators into the back end of this software so that I can use the same program to write all of my other stuff. And then this guy went and wrote the program that I wanted. There are bugs in both of them, so you run into that sort of a thing often. But so this is a song that I called My Adult Life, and it's about being an adult. And well, it kind of is, and it smacks you in the face sometimes. And that is kind of what this song is like, too. So I challenged myself. Anyone listen to dubstep? All right, that was a good answer, or a good question to ask, too. I wanted to write a dubstep song that people cared about the part that wasn't the drop. Because really, you sit around for a minute and you just kind of sit there and, okay, when's the drop coming and whatever. So I wanted people to care about the drop. I also wanted a drop inside of a drop. I wanted it to actually sound good. Keep in mind, this is coming out of one Sega Genesis, So nothing else, I didn't like load this into, some other editing package or Ableton or, load in Massive and, pull out cool samples or anything. This is all synthesized except for half of my snare drum because I wanted extra punch. And then the last thing is because I wanted you to care about that theme that wasn't the drop, I wanted to integrate it into the later part of the song. You can just leave the light off. I see you running back and forth. It doesn't really matter. Everyone can see that, right? Like, yeah, don't worry about it. All right. Yeah, they can just stay. I like being in the dark. I mean, okay, that was weird. So this is my Sega Genesis song. A little bit of elevator music inspiration there. Well, my first original Genesis. Yeah. And really, you notice that even some of the same stuff is going on in each one of these channels. These trackers are actually compatible, so you can use sound effects. Oh, we're gonna get clap going? All right. Ooh, the double clap. I'm not sure clapping and a drop go together, but you can keep doing it if you want to. The polite clap, you have to like, there's all sorts of claps. There's the like gospel over the head, like. You cannot write Super Nintendo music in this, but you can write it in a tracker and then port it over to Super Nintendo. I'm going to stop this for a sec. Super Nintendo is an interesting case, and this is where I kind of start drawing the line. I do not consider Super Nintendo music to be chiptunes. And the reason is the sound chip inside of the Super Nintendo knows how to play samples, and that is what it does. So at the point where the chip is not making its own sound, I think that we're out of the chiptune realm. I still love the Super Nintendo, don't get me wrong. I love Super Nintendo music. I'm a huge fan. Super Metroid is probably one of my favorite game soundtracks ever. But because I'm an old school, old guy, I just, at the point where the sound chip is not making its own sound and synthesizing sound, it's not a chiptune to me anymore. There are instruments that are built in that are recordings of instruments, though. And that's the thing, like that piano or like the banjo or whatever, those are built into firmware and uploaded to a DSP. So the SPC 700 is a 6502 CPU that is linked to a DSP that can produce all of those sounds. You can also do, because it's a full-on CPU, you can do stuff like write an emulator for a sound chip on the Super Nintendo sound chip. So at that point, it's just a little bit more capable than something that you send numbers to and it synthesizes sound. And so that's my draw the chiptune line thing. I saw another hand go up, I think. Did someone else have a question just now? Does anyone want to hear the drop within the drop? All right. All right, I'm really proud of this because the Genesis, it's really hard to get gritty sound out of the Genesis. It always sounds sort of warm and natural, and that sounded wrong, but anyway. So this is the first drop. Are you ready? It was so hard to make that snare. Of all of the things that is hard in here, the snare was so hard to make. What's up? Question? So the thing that's different between working in software like this and working in, say, a modern, what's called a DAW, which is audio software for anyone that doesn't write music on their computer. The difference is a modern DAW, you can just load in more instruments, you can load in more samples. Doesn't sound right, switch it out, you know, like all of that stuff. But in stuff like this, you're limited to a certain amount, or you know, like you can only make a certain number of sounds at a time, or you can only make it so loud. Like one of the things with the Sega Genesis is that the sample channel, which is like what you would get your sonic drums out of, or you know, every once in a while people use it for sound effects or whatever. It's really, really quiet. So like if we deconstruct this song a little bit, you can hear that I have my sampled drum. But with the rest of the song going, that just gets lost. So we added in this other thing that sounds, let me see if I can just play the pattern. There we go. We have this. This is the Sega Master System in here. And then we also have something that I created, an instrument that doubles as a punchy snare and a bass line, and that is, you hear how much louder that is compared to all of the others? But when we add them together, like none of them sound good on their own, so you kind of have to like do mixing and mastering on like at the same time. And most people don't write music like that. You know, they'll be like, oh, this is too loud, this is too quiet, whatever, and change it in a mixing console, but all of a sudden it's super punchy. So what you're usually doing is you've got all of these instruments, and if they don't sound right, you can change the master volume for the instrument, or you can change the master volume for the channel, but you can't change it over time. So you're going in here and entering values like you see over here. You see 7A, 72, 7A, 72. I'm actually tweaking the volume on the fly of those instruments so that they sound right. This ThinkPad might want some juice. It's plugged in. I don't know that you, well, okay, so Famine Tracker has a text output, and it'll just spit it out to a text file, which I guess you could probably convert to load. I don't know that it's delimited. It usually just pushes it out in some format that you'll get sound drivers for games, and not sound drivers like sound drivers for your sound card or for your motherboard or something like that. But you'll download something. What's a good engine? The Gradual engine is one of them for the Nintendo, and it just there's like 5 different scripts that convert stuff that looks like this but is just in a text file, and it through that like 5 or 12 or however many step process will turn it into assembly language that you can include into your Nintendo game. So you could, I mean, in theory, like write something in a spreadsheet, but it's not really, it's kind of bothersome. You can just write it straight in the tracker, and this tracker will run on like anything. Another popular tracker that does samples is called Milky Tracker, and it exists even on Android, so I've got it on my cell phone. So it's really not hard to carry around a tracker to write music with. Any other questions? I mean, yeah. With the stripe on your pants, yeah. You do have a stripe on your pants.
Would you recommend like cartridges that you can put for your Game Boy or Game Boy Advance? Is that like your tracker?
Sure. One thing that I would recommend you do, yeah. So if you get a flash cart for your Game Boy, you probably get something like an EMS cartridge, and then you'll go and pay the guy that wrote LSDJ $2, and he'll send you a ROM that you can just load onto the flash card. But before you start writing chiptunes, maybe, depending on how old you are or how into it you are, or that sort of a thing, maybe think about what system you would like to write them for. There are a lot of people writing music on Game Boys already. So maybe if you're into the NES or the Commodore or the Atari, like grab an Atari instead and write some music on that. Or even grab the software for the Atari, run it in an emulator, see if it's something that you like using, and then spend the money on the hardware. LSDJ is only $2, so it's kind of hard to go wrong with that. And you can run that in an emulator and see if you'd like using that on your Game Boy before investing in the flash card. Yeah? Longer hair.
Well, can you tell us about the difference between writing music on modern trackers and writing originally on the I've read stuff about like the things well, like what do you know about that?
So you can write a lot of the modern tracker situation, like this right here, is a modern tracker that I've kind of hacked back ends into. So this can do like 32 channels and all sorts of crazy stuff. And the difference between that and the Nintendo is mainly the polyphony. But there are limitations on like the pitch that you can do or the loudness of certain things, that sort of a thing. So that's the big on the surface difference. I think a lot of people might be taking off for opening ceremony or opening ceremonies, yeah, because BronyCon's just starting, right? But for anyone taking off, if you don't mind checking me out online, inversephase.com, that would be stellar. I've got we've got like some stickers and candy and stuff, and you can check me out on social media, or I've got my music up on like 20 different places, that sort of a thing. You're also welcome to stick around and ask questions. Let me go over here. It's called Milky Tracker, M-I-L-K-Y Tracker. Middle. Yes. I use hardware, and I use it often, but I don't like writing directly on the hardware. I like writing on my computer and then outputting it to the hardware. And the reason I like doing that is just because everything is right in front of me here, whereas when you're using something like LSDJ, you'll hold select or start or whatever and have to do a button combo to get to another screen to program your instrument and stuff like that. And I want to go over here and click, I don't want to, like enter the Konami code just to like change an instrument. It's not actually that difficult. It's, they've done their best to make it accessible and that sort of thing. But the hardware is limited to begin with. So, writing music on the hardware is not as easy as writing it on your computer and then sending it to the hardware. So I prefer to do that with the wings. You can, but not probably how you're thinking. You're thinking like, can I remix my MP3s or something like that? Or are you just thinking, can you get a song that someone has already written in this software? Oh, well, perfect. Then yes, the answer is yes. Some people release their project files or their tracker files, and you can download the tracker file and load it into the tracker that they use. And all these trackers are like free or a couple bucks or something like that, so it's not hard to get one of those. And you can look at how they wrote their music. You can learn from that, and then you can change it around if you want. Get permission if you release your remix. Yeah. It is all dependent on how you write your music. If you put that, the thing is when we were talking about NES, we were saying we could make 3 notes at a time. So if you play a chord, you're done. But what you can do is play a chord and then change one of the notes so that the other 2 notes hold out, and then you're just playing a lead or something like that. Another thing you can do is an arpeggio, where you're just iterating through the notes of your chord. And I do that. I actually did that in the song that we were playing originally. Well, actually, let's Someone might know this. This is done on a Commodore 64. So you hear that blippy thing? It sounds like a chord. It's almost fooling your ear, but not quite. So if you look in 2, you see that I'm just playing that chord, playing the notes for that chord really fast in rapid succession. If I stop it, you can see, D sharp in the 5th octave, F sharp in the 5th octave, H, which is German for B, because this program is German, in the 4th octave. Everyone's like, what's an H note? I don't get that. So those are a couple ideas to do chords. If you do a system that has more than 3 or 4 notes to play at a time, you can actually just play the chord outright. But most systems that are 8 or 16-bit are limited to 3 or 4 sounds at a time. You, yeah.
I have 2 questions. That remake of Super Smash Bros. That you were working on, is that a ROM? Can I put that on a cartridge?
You can, yeah.
And then, do you have any recommendations for websites where I can maybe find the chiptunes and share them with people?
There's chipmusic.org. There are a lot of veterans on chipmusic.org, so go in with a thick skin. But yeah, we can write it down on here. There are also a couple IRC channels if you like to chat. There are a lot of fart jokes flying around the chat rooms, so those are kind of weird. But you can find chiptuners on Bandcamp. Just talk to us, really. A lot of us are willing to just like I'm doing right now. We can just talk to you and give you ideas. Where are you from? Here?
From New Jersey.
Okay. If you're willing to go to Philly, there's a monthly gathering called 8 Static. And if you're willing to go to New York, there's a kind of monthly gathering called, there's one called I.O., and there's another one called Pulse Wave. And there are a bunch of chiptuners that just gather there. You could meet up and listen to chiptunes and that sort of thing. I know that's not online, which is kind of what you were asking, but yeah, meeting people in person is definitely a better way to interpret what they're trying to tell you than flaming each other on forums. Yeah, I think it's about time. So, any last minute? I saw your hand kind of.
Yeah, if you want to stick around and answer some of my questions I necessary about chiptunes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just catch me outside the door when I walk out, and with the glasses on your hat. Yeah.
Yeah, in Japan, chiptunes are mostly done with the Game Boy for concerts and everything. Is there a reason why the Game Boy is so popular?
So, a lot of it's not necessarily that the Game Boy is the most popular system, but the Game Boy is the first portable system to have a tracker on it. So it's mostly just that the Game Boy. It's not that the Game Boy was the first system ever. In fact, chiptunes, existed in 1983. You could argue that original game music, is chiptunes. You might piss off a couple chiptune guys by saying that, because sometimes you go to a chiptune show and they'll play an original up on stage, and someone will walk up to them and be like, "I really like that Mega Man song you played." So that can kind of irritate a musician, but. Anyway, it's my time. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.